Good afternoon. The talk that I'll be giving is titled Deep Focus, and deep focus or depth of field is a photographic term, so photographers in the audience will understand what I'm talking about when I talk about depth of field, but the picture on the screen illustrates this term. It's a term for the focal length of the image. So you can see in this image that the middle of the picture is in focus, but things that are further away are blurry. Things that are closer to the observer are blurry. This is a narrow depth of field, and photographers can control this with lenses and settings and things like that. The next photo that I'll show you also demonstrates narrow depth of field, and one thing I'd like you to notice is that the subject is clearly in focus, but the context around the subject is not. So here we've got a male, and we can see clearly the features of this person, but we don't know where he is. He could be in an office. He could be in an airport in Russia. We don't know where he is when this picture is taken. Obviously, this is a loaded picture, right? But that illustrates what we're trying to do with this project, and that is look beyond what we see with the tools that we have available. The tools that we have available give us a picture that is often very difficult to understand, but doesn't provide a lot of context in any case. And so what we'd like to do is enhance that context by looking at features that we might not normally look at to try to get an indication of insider risk. So let me give you a tale of two different insiders. Insider not necessarily being malicious insider, just insider, somebody with trusted access. Alice is the first one. She is a research scientist. She has access to the company's crown jewels, and she's asked to present her latest work. So she creates a presentation with sensitive information and uses removable media to carry the presentation to the meeting. That's not a violation of any company policy. Her company allows that, so no problem there. The next insider, Mallory. No difference. Mallory, Alice, Mallory, Alice, Mallory. They're both research scientists. They both are asked to present their work, and they both carry their work to the meeting on a removable media. Let's read between the lines now. Let's look more closely at Alice. Alice is a research scientist. She's agreeable. She gets along well with her peers. She has a history of positive performance. She acknowledges the contributions of her entire team in the presentation that she makes. And when she carries the file to the presentation, she encrypts the file. Let's look at Mallory. Mallory, a little bit different. She has a huge ego. She manipulates others to get ahead. These are personality features that psychologists might refer to as narcissism and Machiavellianism. Right? I love that word. It's fun to say. How often can I say that word in a single presentation? She has a sense of entitlement about the products that she creates, and when she's asked to present her latest work, she comments to a coworker about payback time. So there's some disgruntlement there, and if we sort of stretch it a little bit, a psychologist might say there's some sociopathic tendencies there in terms of not really connecting morality with actions and consequences of actions. So she doesn't encrypt the file, and along the way she stops and hands the removable media to a competitor who's her next employer. Now, could you detect this? Very, very difficult. There are not a lot of technical observables here. There's not a lot of ways that monitoring systems could detect that Mallory was going to hand this data off, much less detect that she actually did it. So how could we detect that Mallory is a bigger risk than Alice? And that's the question here. I mentioned the challenges are there's little technical data here to look at. There are other challenges about finding the difference between these two. One of the challenges is the low base rate of insiders in general. So I give the example of Mallory, but Mallory is not typical. It happens very, very, very seldom. Some statistics, now this is not for all types of insider threats. This is for sort of the worst and the kinds of insiders that our customers care about. 0.02%, 0.02% is the estimate within a population of the really, really bad, the ugly, the people that are going to harm the organization. So that's very hard to find to begin with, but you have people that don't mean to be bad but are still breaking the rules and doing bad things. Right? An example would be a policy that allows removable media but only by trained people and only if it's something that the company owns. And that type of policy alone would find a tremendously high false positive rate, and does in the field. because people plug in their phones and they say, oh, I was just charging my phone. I didn't realize that it was removable media. Or I got this at a conference. It's okay to plug it in, right? The company owns it, so they paid for it. I can plug it into my computer, right? Or my training expired yesterday, but I still know what I'm doing, or I logged in with a different account. There's endless excuses that people use, but they still broke the rules, right? So they still get flagged as alerts. And then there's the people that get flagged as alerts and they didn't even break the rules. So we're looking at 0.02% of the bad, I'm sorry, of the ugly, sort of really bad, but within 1% of people that break the rules anyway, it's very, very low base rate. And as I mentioned, high false positive rates. 99% false positive rate for insider threat indicators, technical indicators, is not uncommon. And certainly we try to improve that, but there's a limit to which we can improve things and still have some guarantee that we're catching those true positives. So analysts look at tens of thousands of alerts per year. Only a few of those represent actual malicious insider activity. Okay, as if it couldn't get any harder, right? Any more difficult. Insiders may not break any rules at all. They may not. There may be no alerts. There may be no red flags in those systems. There may be very few indicators. They may not do anything that would rise above the level of concerning to organizations. So Kurt mentioned trying to find a toothpick in a field of haystacks. It's actually like trying to find a needle in a stack of needles. There's no difference. And so it's extremely challenging. And to do that, to find the needle, the person that doesn't break any rules, it's critical to understand the person and their personality and the way that they behave with others to understand the risk. And that's what this project's trying to do. So our approach is to measure those factors that represent personality factors that are relevant to insider risk. And we do that by observing characteristics of people's behaviors that are hard to conceal or mimic or misrepresent. And one of those types of behaviors, one of those types of data is email, is when we compose email to other people within an organization, we use language. And there's been research done by psychologists for years that link the way that people use language to their personality characteristics. So we leverage that to analyze data sets of people sending email to do analysis on personality factors. Now we're specifically looking for personality factors that research has shown are indicative of insider risk. And so I've mentioned some of those already. There's something called the Big Five personality factors: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. Neuroticism is not necessarily a bad thing. One of our friends did, a researcher at the FBI did a study on her population and found that she had an extremely high percentage of narcissists compared to a general normal population. But it turns out that's what the FBI is looking for in the people that she was studying. Narcissists tend to make good FBI agents. And so, I'm sorry, not narcissists, narcissist, neurotics, it's all the same, right? No. But so it's not necessarily a bad thing to be neurotic. And then we have something called the dark triad, right? Narcissism, Machiavellianism, there's two, and psychopathy. And so those are traits that are typically linked with people that do bad things and really show no remorse in doing it. And insider threats, the bad types of insiders tend to have those traits. So our approach was to collect linguistics for good and bad populations, establish those psychometric values for those people, compare the psychometrics. By psychometrics, I just mean that the values of the personality factors for the people within that population. Compare the ones for the good and the bad populations to identify what are the significant features that indicate insider risk, using what psychologists have proposed. And then take it the next step and say, all right, we'll sort of ignore what the psychologists have proposed and come up with our own, right? We've got this great data set of 80 features of how a person uses language, and we can add as many as we want. If we think that there's something important, we can add it and perform the analysis. What do we find is important? And so some of the interesting results, we did an analysis of the psychometrics for an entire population over time. It doesn't say this on the slide, but this was the SCI population, right? Anonymized, we didn't see any of the email text, we didn't see any of the identifiers, but it's the text of the people that sent email at the SCI over the last several years. We found a lot of things. I just highlighted a few. Higher levels of agreeableness during holiday periods, right? That might be expected, and it's good to know. Lower levels of cognitive processing during holiday periods, right? No, right. Yeah, so we check out. One of the interesting ones, though, and I can't confirm this, I can't back this up, so take it with a grain of salt, but we saw lower levels of negativity after significant terrorist events or observations. And to illustrate that, we saw a significant drop in the level of negativity in the email that people sent immediately after the 10th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Right? So September 11th, 2011, we saw shortly after that a drop-off in negativity, and well, maybe that's a coincidence. Maybe there's something else that happened that week or that month. I don't know. I'm hypothesizing, but we saw the same sort of drop-off after the Boston Marathon attacks. So same drop-off in negativity. Again, it could be a coincidence. I don't know. I can't go into the email. I can't see the email to do sort of another type of analysis and see is this really happening. But but it shows potential. It shows what we could do with a population. Now, among the individuals, we identified what are the most distinguishing linguistic features. Right? What features can be used to set people apart from each other, and we found which those are. We were able to attribute emails to specific authors. So if we had enough data on how a specific person writes email, and then given an unattributed sample, we could reasonably accurately predict who wrote that email. Even more interesting, we could identify the recipient. Now again, it's all anonymized, but we had some ground truth that we could look at. And in one particular case, one very interesting case, we were able to build models for specific recipients, for 3 recipients of this person's email. So this person sent to a lot of people, and for 3 people we could build models. 2 of those people were foreign nationals. So now we're looking at significant characteristics in that person's linguistic style when they're communicating with a foreign national. And they weren't trying to cover anything up, and they weren't typing in a different language, right? That would seem obvious, right? But it was English speaking, but the person spoke differently, typed differently in email, and we could detect that. We could detect email masquerading, so somebody pretending to be somebody else, and we know how many words it takes to be reasonably confident that the email did not come from the original person. Social hierarchy. This social hierarchy in the terms of social networks that Andy mentioned, the network within the organization. So not necessarily social, but more organizational, I guess would be a better term. But when people compose emails to their boss, for instance, or their boss's boss up the chain, they use language differently than if they're composing email to peers or down the chain. A lot of that has to do with pronoun usage. And that's not new. That psychologists have speculated that and shown that for a while, but we were able to see that within the SEI as well. And we could identify users that were significantly outside the population norms for key features. And so as we transition this work into other environments and other partners and other customers, we're able to have a better grasp on the ground truth of how important is that, right? It's people that are outside the populations, what sort of reasons are there for them being outside the population? Let's look briefly at just 2 users. These charts show, let me get it right, neuroticism and agreeableness, right? The blue line shows the average for the population over time for each characteristic, and the red line shows the average for the user over time. So we see a user that's significantly above the average for the population in neuroticism and significantly low in the population in terms of agreeableness. Is this a user of concern? Maybe, right? We'd need to know how many other users are above the population. How far is that? We need some context and some scale and better graphs, right? But let me offer the second user and see if this user might be of concern. User was below the average for neuroticism, and only recently, all of a sudden, is now going up and is above the level of the population, average of the population, corresponding with the drop in agreeableness. Now, those are 2 important factors that we've determined, or that others have determined are important in insider risk. So now we're seeing a change in a person, right? This person, I would argue, is of more interest than the person that's just always neurotic, right? This person this person would be the one I would put first on the list. So our important findings, communication medium is a significant factor in linguistic analysis. And we saw that in other works that we looked at, people tried to compare writings from books with email writings or spoken word with email text. And we could see the difference between those populations was night and day, and it had nothing to do with their personalities. It had to do with the medium in which they're communicating. So the communication medium is significant. The populations are significant, right? We compared SEI to a similar type of population and population with known bad. And again, it was easy to see the distinction, but it wasn't because of the personality. So there's some challenges there. We, as I mentioned before, can attribute authors. We can detect masquerading. And I think most importantly, users of concern can be identified within a population based on linguistic analysis alone. And I'm not suggesting that linguistic analysis alone is the answer to any insider threat problem, right? We're not pointing the finger at anybody before they've done something. We're not accusing people of anything that they haven't done. It's science fiction, right? But this is a tool that insider threat programs can use to help whittle down that 99% false positive rate. If they've got 100 people to look at today and they can only look at 10, this kind of thing can help put the most interesting people at the top of that list. So this is where the real impact of this research, we believe, can be felt. And we have started to transition it to some customer organizations where we can measure that. So our future work, we will be applying the technique to populations with well-established sort of psychosocial ground truth. And there's different ways to measure that I don't really have the time to go into right now, but how do you establish a population's ground truth in terms of their personality factors? Wouldn't be great if it wouldn't really be great. From a researcher perspective, from a data perspective, it would be great if every employer gave every employee this comprehensive personality test and we could use that data, right? But that's not going to happen. But we'd like to identify other types of at-risk users in a population. Suppose that it wasn't just the insider you were trying to detect, but suppose you could detect when somebody was vulnerable to a particular type of approach, particular type of persuasion. Right? Wouldn't that be interesting if you knew that your adversary was going to present that certain type of persuasion and you knew who your vulnerable people were? We'd like to look at detecting deception and measuring mimicry and integrating that into operational programs. So we partnered with University of Oxford. Actually got to spend some time there this summer collaborating with them in their cybersecurity center. Their government is funding a very similar project, so we're fortunate to work together. UMass, we had some excellent grad students in particular from UMass, and then our own machine learning computer science departments as well. So thank you.